All right, so we have recording. So let me. So Tazi, I assume you're you're here yourself today, which is good. So I can delete that. Stephen. So Stephen. I don't see Prasoon. Vincat. Don't see Rob, and I see Tim. All right, so we have enough people to get going. So Boris posted. Okay, so any other agenda items? Let me start with that. So you can see my agenda here. Are there any other agenda items? Okay, so Boris posted in the general chat that he's cross-linked to docker.com and codecov.io. So you can go there and see the links to the GitHub repos. Any other significance to that, Boris?
Yeah, so this is a standard way to publish Dockers in addition to publish on the GitHub itself. So Docker Hub is a huge deal. So we currently have a new account on the Docker Hub for OPI, which Sridhar will help with Linux Foundation to manage. And we're starting to ramp up all the repos that we have to publish into the Docker Hub as well. This is the first. The second one is code coverage. So now we have, depending on the repos, around 80% code coverage with unit testing. So we all report for the code coverage IO. So that is the two things that happened last week.
Yeah. So there's the code coverage showing the test
all the repos that we have and the repos that have testing versus repos that doesn't have testing. As previously announced, we're looking for test contributors to come in and improve our test coverage.
We could, yeah, we should figure out a prize to give away to if you get 100, if you force 100% coverage. Of course, that would have some gamesmanship, but anyway. And then there's the.
I've got a sticker or two I can pass out.
Exactly. Thank you. And then there's the Docker.
All of it is automated with CI/CD pipelines. We publish, we do the releases, we do all the automatic testing. So all of that is automated.
Okay, so that was good stuff that happened Friday. All right, next one is really quick. On the SmartNIC Summit?
Yes. So SmartNIC Summit, we've been given the opportunity to have some space at the SmartNIC Summit to hold meetings there face to face. It was even suggested that we hold our TSC meeting as many as we could face to face on stage in a breakout room or something like that, and allow others to watch that meeting happen. So not really participate in the meeting per se. They could ask questions after, but to watch us do the work that we do. So that's an option that we've got available to us. I wanted to put that to the board here and see, or to the TSC, and see who was interested and able to be there during those dates in June. It's in San Jose. It's at the DoubleTree in San Jose near the airport.
And when do we have to make that decision based on the SmartNIC Summit Agenda Committee?
If we had a decision today that we wanted that would be great. I've got a SmartNIC Summit planning meeting in 3 hours, I think. That would be great. If I'm sure that we could answer them anytime in email, but I could mention it today if we wanted me to at that meeting.
Yeah. So put your hand up if you're planning on going to the SmartNIC Summit. You know, do a little reaction and put your hand up. It's San Jose and next to the airport, next to the San Jose airport. And invite needed. There's no invite needed. It's the second year of a new show that people are trying to put in, and I'm going because I live in San Jose. So. Okay, so only a couple of people.
I think I saw 5 hands go up and down.
Oh, okay, yeah, put them up in.
Yeah, I am unable to. I am on a cell phone outside,
Right.
so I'm unable to do whatever that is. You can count
Right,
me.
I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna say that likely no, but we'll post something over the week and see if we have enough interest.
Okay.
I'll post a poll this week. Okay, and then we have an OPI overview presentation at the SmartNIC Summit.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to do a keynote session, and when they open the breakout, let's see, that's SmartNIC, yeah. And then when they open up for breakout sessions, we have an opportunity to submit as many as we want. Right now, the keynote session is I'm proposing here's the we've been talking about it in the outreach group, but a DPU definition. So what's a smart NIC? What's a foundational NIC? What's a DPU? What's an exotic NIC with an FPGA? What are those sorts of? How do we define them? And then what are the use cases that a DPU solves? And how is OPI enabling those use cases? Again, it'll be a short, probably 7 to 10 minute keynote during that, along with other keynotes that happen. But something short like that, and announcing OPI and where we're playing in the space.
Yep.
That's what we're looking for there. And then this is a very technical conference, so I'd love to have really technical content presented there as well. Going deep into why we chose, why did we choose OTEL? Why did we choose Strong Swan? Why did we choose, why did we choose zero trust provisioning secure? So why did we do those things? What are the benefits? If we've got demos to show, those would go over well as well. So I know we have demos to show, but those would go over at that conference as well. So when I'm guessing we're going to decide today in that SmartNIC Summit meeting what day the call for papers will be announced and when it will close. So as soon as I find out, I'll post it in the outreach channel and to the general channel and ask for people to put forth presentations.
Okay, excellent.
On I was gonna say, on the similar topic, the SNIA virtual event that's coming up, I'd like a technical presentation to be done there, and that event is, let me get the link.
We'll find it. We'll find it, and I'll link it here. All right. So we'll organize. So Paul, if you don't mind, sort of getting contributions lined up from people.
Yeah, I was just wanting to ask in this form. I need it. This is a technical discussion they want, and so I'd love to get someone here to agree to do that, who is able to do it virtually.
Paul, this is Dan. I think that I know at Intel we have interest in presenting at SNIA. So if you're unable to find anyone else, I know that there was the previous presentation I think went over so well that we want to be involved going forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Can do.
Right. Okay. So I think we can resolve the, who does what. It would show in our forums and or mailing list, rather than trying to hash it out and discuss it here, because I want to
Got
get VinCat and the lab proposal. But everyone has a heads up now, and so we can resolve it. All right, VinCat, I'm going to stop sharing, and you can share and walk us quickly through the deck. Don't present the deck, just we want review comments and to make sure no one is going to have excessive heartburn over anything. Can you present? Or do I need?
I can't share. Can somebody share?
Yeah.
I can just quickly talk about it.
Yeah,
I just emailed it, got it emailed. So.
It's on the TSC. So let me get it open. It'll just be a few seconds. Okay. All right. So there's your team. OPI Lab. Great. Okay.
Yeah, I
Phase-
hope I'm not missing anyone. There, I think we covered. There's a lot of feedback, a lot of discussion happened earlier. I think all of that resulted in the 2 documents that were sent to the 4 vendors. Okay, it went away. Okay.
Yeah. No.
So, yeah. So the main thing we are talking about is the, I mean, if you can go to the next slide, right? So there are 4 phases of the lab. Each phase, the lab is able to provide some specific functionality, right? I think phase 1 will enable us to do functional validation and conformance. And then as we expand, eventually we can decide when that second one is. Phase is maybe it's 1 year or maybe earlier. We have the choice. So then we can look at interoperability and portability and things like that go across companies. And then eventually we can even try to driving adoption, essentially by creating labs that somebody can use it quickly, so the barrier to adoption comes down, and eventually we could even have certification. So, but that's just we will kind of go through it. We will get there when we get there. The next slide, and the budget that we are asking right now is 113K plus something that the vendor quotes to maintain the lab. Once we pick, we will have an estimate, and so that's the budget part that's in the previous slide. And here you can see what is in the test bed. Maybe Mircha can explain better if there are more detailed questions on what is in the test bed and what it can do. But at a high level, this is to make sure that our, every time code is checked in to GitHub, we have a CI/CD and some standard tests, work fine before things get accepted. And then this lab is not accessible to anyone. It's not like anyone in the community can just get onto this box and do things. This is mostly to make sure that the code base is maintained, and sanity and regression and things like that. So that's the phase 1. Next slide, please. Yeah, there are. Boris, do you think we should put the bill of materials? Maybe not, right? It'll be too much detail for the board. But what we want to update the board is that we have sent, we have requested for a quote from 4 vendors. We send them the requirements and bill of materials. They're all asking a bunch of questions offline, and we're answering as much as possible. And these are the 4 vendors. We have University of New Hampshire, and then U&V and Tech Mahindra and Sarvana managed. So these are the 4 vendors who showed interest. We gave them a deadline. It's not a very strict deadline, but it's good to put a date so that things keep moving. We said that and next Friday, 17th, is the deadline for submitting the quote. Most likely, all of them are will be able to give us by a quote by that date, and we'll have another week to decide. The same set of folks who are on the first slide, most likely we will get together, go through the quotes and decide. If someone else is interested, we will post in the Slack so they can join. The couple of things which I would have loved to get an actual date that I could not get, and I don't want to just guess, is that, if at all we decide a vendor, how quickly is the first equipment reaching the lab, and then and when is the lab, when does the whole lab setup start, and when does it end, it becomes usable. Looking at some of the lead times, etc. I don't have those dates, and I hope I can get some dates, but I'm not the expert here. So I'm asking Mircha, and Mircha might have some other friends who may have better dates. So I'll have to work on it offline.
I think it all depends. If Linux Foundation is going to do the purchasing, if the labs are going to do it, then lead times, if we want some PCIe version 5, yeah. I don't think
Which one is faster? Which one do we should have some estimate, right? Is it that much of a difference between Linux Foundation versus somebody else doing it? When somebody else does it, I don't know if it has any implication to the way it gets depreciated, or when somebody does it, they may charge some more. That's what I heard from Tech Mahindra, that if they want, if we want them to buy the equipment and set up the whole lab, they will do that. But when they buy and all that, they may charge a little more, because then they'll add some markup before they charge us back to Linux Foundation. That's what I heard. I asked them to put it in the quote. I'm sure others also might be doing the same. But if you believe that is fast, and if it is only small amount, maybe it's not an issue.
So does anybody have any comments? So Boris, you go first.
Yeah, I looked at the bill of materials. It's look a little bit over, a little bit too much. Like what forum was it reviewed? And I'm pretty sure I saw quite a low amount of comments and reviews on that. So maybe we can do a quick round of really asking people to review it once it's merged now and propose any reviews, changes to that. Seems to me that 100K and a lot of necessary equipment for the phase 1. And I think it will help to put the link, at least not the entire bill of material, but a link inside this deck, so people can quickly click on it and see.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, go ahead, Keith, and then I have a couple of comments.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to clarify, the bill of material, I know it listed specific like servers and things of that nature, but I also recall, and you guys need to confirm this, those are just placeholders. They're actually not something we're asking to procure, right? So we're more interested in the lab services, racks, the power and all that stuff, but the actual servers themselves were not, at least at this phase, they're not the actual servers that we want to acquire with this initial funding. Is that correct or incorrect?
No,
That's my understanding as well.
yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
Mircea?
No, this was raising my hand. Yeah, they're just placeholder. We are kind of doing categories of items and some items in there. We never agreed and selected the vendors and the part numbers. That discussion did not happen yet.
But how are we sending this BOM of materials already to people to as a quote, to get a quote?
Because for the lab quote, you just need to know kind of how much power and how much space it takes. What do you carry server, I don't know, with PCIe 5 or PCIe 4 or Intel or AMD CPU? You just care that it's a 2U server that may take 1,000 watts for lab. So lab doesn't care that the part number is not quite correct.
Okay. I see.
Yeah, and okay, so I agree with Boris on people going back to the bill of materials, and verifying the list. The second, and again, we called out in previous reviews that this is a placeholder, and we need to shop the actual best fit equipment other than the DPUs, because we're trying to have coverage there. I think the core BOM we ought to put in front of the board. So the table that's at the top, we should put in front of the board and get rid of extraneous junk, and it should fit. If I look at the number of rows, the font might not be the biggest, but it'll fit. So we need to have a slide with a condensed version of the phase 1 BOM, and in particular what makes up this 113K. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is we need one slide that says, here's the ultimate lab plan to put phase 1 in context. So we spent time on that. We agreed to it. We need a summary of what the phases do, more than 2 words at the bottom of a chart. And we could walk them through the actual markdown file, but I think we need a summary, a concise summary. But it should be all the phases and be a little bit more wordy than functional validation conformance. And then this slide and this slide are otherwise fine, because what we're going to be asking for is approval to go spin the 113K, assuming that there and there may be a round of adjustments and so on, but that's what we're going to be asking for on Monday morning. Boris?
Yeah, I wanted just to help Mircea and Keith. We do need to fill the table with a real part number. So I want to ask the TSC members to help us with the part numbers, right? We want to put DPUs inside, and we never received any information from the DPU vendors what specifically DPUs part numbers we need, because we need to start this table. We reached out several times and didn't get any responses. So I wanted to use this time and reiterate this once again. We need servers companies like Dell and others, HP, to put their quotas maybe, or their part numbers that they suggest, DPU vendors to put their part numbers, so we can have a full proposal for the bill of materials.
Just so you know, Boris, I've started individually messaging people on Slack, asking them to do that very thing.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah, just helping out. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, no, that's great. But
it's
just
that
so when they see that message,
it's those items that we need enumerated.
And the servers, right? I prefer that we have a fully qualified server with DPU. For example, Dell and HP already qualified several DPUs. I prefer, instead of building Lego in the lab, I prefer to already procure the server that supports thermal, at least, for the DPUs. Otherwise, our lab is going to be, on fire
So
every
VinCat,
second week.
yeah, it's a good point. VinCat, Mircea, what are your points?
No, I was saying exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with Boris. So I was going to say exactly what he said. So we need the DPUs, so we know which ones, and then server we need ones which are already qualified for it. Once we have the DPU part numbers, that will dictate what options we have for servers, and it will all fall in place.
Okay, so for the DPU vendors, can we get the DPU vendors to get someone to specifically give us what's being asked for here? So I'll go down the list. So Tazi, can we get that for Bluefield 2? Presumably we want Bluefield 3 pending its availability, but in this time frame we should be able to get Bluefield 3, and presumably we would want that. So Tazi, can we get NVIDIA?
What exactly the time frame, Joe?
The time frame would be, I would imagine that the purchasing would start in 3 months. So do we only have Bluefield 2, or do we have the first?
I think if we're gonna do the POs or 3 months from now, I would go with Bluefield 3s in theory, but I need to see how we are on availability, and if not, maybe fall back to Bluefield 2.
I don't think Bluefield 3 is a good idea for
Okay.
the reasons of servers. Again, not HP and not Dell qualified Bluefield 3 yet. So we need to go with Bluefield 3 and qualify Dell or HP servers.
Okay, so we can do that as another. We could do Bluefield 3 as another round. That's fair. So Tazi, can we get the Bluefield 2 exact part number that you would recommend and its server compatibility list as well? And then
Do we have sure I can do that, but do we have the expected servers to be there so I can map matching DPUs to the actual server that we will have there?
We have only few
buy-
vendors that actually qualify DPUs, so we can choose from them.
Yeah, we would buy the server.
I see. So the DPU will dictate the server.
It has to.
I think it's vice versa. It's opposite. The server will dictate DPUs. We have very little amount of servers that actually qualify the DPUs.
Yeah. So the DPU dictates the server. In other words, which DPUs we pick determines which servers we buy. We don't buy a server and then pick which DPUs might fit that, fit in that server. We buy the DPU and we pick a server that can host it.
I see. Okay.
So the DPU selection and the specific DPU part number and what the DPUs are qualified for determine our final choices for the because we, as Boris says, we need ones that we know will work together without excess trouble. And all right, and then Stephen.
But just to add, Boris, I would recommend using Bluefield 3s at this time frame. Many new features, and I don't think we should invest in Bluefield 2 for a new lab.
Well, so yeah, and the time frame for this has an effect because we have the same problem with Intel Mount Evans. Isn't that correct, Dan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to want to actually bring it in one of our reference servers. So it wouldn't be qualified by someone else.
So, okay, so these details will not be worked out by Monday. I still want to put this in front of the board Monday, but we're going to caveat it with these details need to be worked out. And we have to work these details out, and it has to be with the individual DPU vendors and with their qualified servers, right? I mean, is Dell, I could say, yeah, Dell can support the following combinations, but I don't think that's the right thing for Dell to say. I want the DPU vendors to drive which selection of servers, and then we can basically determine the most cost-effective server for each DPU from an OPI perspective, right? So, all right, Stephen, you've been patient.
Yeah, just to kind of reinforce that a little bit. I mean, I think, in general, Boris is right. We need to make sure that we have a server that fits, the requirements for the DPU vendor and is, sufficiently supported. I think that, in some of these cases, we're going to be early enough in the process with these DPUs that there's not going to be a selection of servers that are pre-certified for them, right? So we're going to have to be a little bit flexible. And in the case where there's not yet a server that's certified for it, I think we would really want to lean on the DPU vendor to either provide us a server that they have done their testing with, or provide us the information so that we can get one ourselves.
Yeah, it's the second. We need the information on what DPU goes in what server, either officially announced or just what the DPU vendor actually uses, so that we can so that, again, we're sure it works. Okay. Renato, I agree with you, Stephen. We need that.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that now that HP is in the, OPI, should we exchange one of those super micro servers for HP?
Yeah, well, no, so again, all of the equipment list here is placeholder just for sizing. So we can say, here's the shape and size of the budget. And roughly the amount of equipment we need to execute phase one. And, the actual stuff we buy is not going to be far off of these costs. Probably a little cheaper, as Boris pointed out earlier, but it's not going to be far off in reality, having seen enough of these, real bombs for these kind of labs.
But I'm with Renato. I think it's a good idea. HP, Dell, and other server companies, together with DPU vendors, should supply a possibility list that we can all choose from, what they recommend,
Yes.
recommendation, and then we can choose from it. So yes, for sure. HP, Dell, go ahead, ARM. Sorry for forgetting you, Mark. So yeah, go ahead and propose what servers you want us to put in the lab with what DPUs. I really like Dan Daly comment that Intel wants to give their own reference server with the IPU. That's totally fine. So put all of these proposals in writing, and we can all kind of review it and agree upon.
Well, it's so the DPU choice drives the server selection. Full stop. I mean, that's all it is. Renato, anything else?
No, I'm sorry. Let me take my hand down.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Anything else on this equipment list that looks completely out of place?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
So if I look at this 113K, this lists just purely all the stuff that are going to go in the rack, right? So I don't see, like, for example, like NHI, whatever that, for the lab service itself accounted for in this 113K, right? So what's the dollar amount for the lab services itself? It's not here, right?
BinCap, Merchant?
No, so no, it's not. I think that's where we really have to tell them there are three costs, right? That are not, there is one DPU cost, rest is this BOM cost, and then the lab service itself. So I was about to say that, yeah.
Yeah,
This
but
is-
we don't have an estimate. Okay, so
Yeah,
on
we
slide
still
2,
don't.
you need to put that. Do you have a ballpark, or it won't be above, X dollars?
So we have Linux Foundation gave some numbers. Sridhar, do you want to chime in on how it is happening with other labs at Linux Foundation?
Okay, so typically it depends on what are all the services that they provide, right? For example, if they provide remotely configuring, booking the lab, and a fully nice front end and everything to do those things, and 24/7 and all those, depending on the services, it may vary somewhere between 60K to 100K per year.
How many racks? Do you know? Is that like one rack? Because the reason I ask is that, you don't want the lab to burn, right?
So they don't go, from what I've seen from the last 2 to 3 labs, right? They don't go by the number of racks and other things, because in one project which I've seen and using and working also, I think multiple people book the lab and we share the resources and everything. So in that, it was like a 2 to 3, 2 racks, I think, 2 to 3 racks, I think.
Sure,
Around-
but all I'm saying is that it should be an increasing function of how many racks you want, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about tons of, HVAC capacity, all that stuff, right?
Correct. True. But the way I've seen this diagram also, right? So we should expect somewhere between these two numbers. I can do an educated guess now, but I don't want to do it now.
Yeah, that's fine. Right. And the other thing that's missing here is the sum of the power requirements. I presume that the lab, if we send them the bomb, and we use that as sort of an estimate, which isn't a terrible one. We presume that they're going to come back with, yeah, it's this much power and things like that, right? So the power and cooling requirement for this rack of equipment, I mean, we need an estimate on that, but to do that, again, we need which DPU, which server more precisely.
Yeah, so I think based on this BOM, the vendors are estimating if we change this drastically, yes, we will have to redo that.
Well, no,
But,
no, I don't think we'll change it drastically. But anyway, all right. So Jan, you've been waiting.
Yeah, you kind of started to address the concerns that I had listening to this conversation. You got multiple issues going here, like multiple things that needs to be discussed. There's the lab services and there's equipment procurement. And the lab services should have an information about what you're procuring to them, or I mean, what you're going to be giving to them, but they should not be necessarily bidding or part of that, right? So I think based on what I've heard just from you now, and also what Boris said a little bit earlier, we should probably come up with a firm list of the equipment that we need, so we can calculate the actual power requirements for that, so we can, ballpark the rack space, so we can actually give the technical specification to the company so they can provide the bid. Otherwise, we'll be going in loops if we're going to change things around.
Yeah. All right. So Monday, so I think we still need to start this process on Monday with the board. And for Monday, what I believe we should say is, here's the overall goals and phasing of the lab, what that means. Here's a preliminary estimate for what a bomb would look like and what what would go in the lab for phase one. And we have the following questions that we're running down, which is the lab service and services cost, procurement details, and precise equipment details. So which GPU go with which server, and the precise costs, power and cooling associated with that. And then the precise DPU, we have a request out to the DPU vendors, and I can reinforce to the board that we need this. We need to know from the DPU vendors, what are the range of servers that are qualified or recommended, if not qualified, for those DPUs, so that we have a concrete list to do the final selection from. So I think that's what we put in front of the board on Monday morning, and get them thinking about this as well. Mark?
Joe, shall we just create a subcommittee to chase this down? It seems like
we have
helpful.
Yeah, we have one. Vincat's been leading it.
Okay, so Venkat's going to take over. Okay, you're going to continue the work with the bomb, not just the selection of the lab.
So Vincat and Murcia have been running this.
Yep.
There's clearly more to be done, though.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Yes. Yeah. Some of it is becoming iterative, but it's like, without selecting the vendor, without having the part numbers, what is the estimate? But I think the estimates are good as a first way to get started. The first slide has a list of people who are participating in whenever there is a meeting, depending on, some days, some specific person may not be available, but the first slide has the list of names. And we are posting once in a while whatever is happening in the POC. I'm forgetting the Slack group. So
again, if you want to help drive this effort, contact Venkat and join this list. And Venkat, you heard the feedback for the additional level of detail to make this real.
Yep, got it. Yep.
Okay.
Thank
you. I'll add a couple of notes on that as well. Okay. Anything else at all on the lab? But anyway, so for the deck for Monday, Venkat, I need you to basically put kind of the the overall plan, make one slide with a summary of the overall plan, so we can show them the scope with some more detail on what phase one is. And then I think we need a page with the BOM. And then what we say is we still have work to do on final DPU selection. We need the DPU vendors to give us, and we can put that on the board as well. We need the server selection driven from the DPU detail list. We have the lab services cost, which is again in flight. Again, we say that here, but what that's going to drive is the lab services and procurement cost. And then we probably need a power estimate, although maybe that comes as part of the lab vendor engagement. Anything else that we need? Okay. Let's go back. All right. That covered. All right. So now in the lifecycle and provisioning of the API working groups, there have been very good proposals coming in. And in the use case group, I know there's another proposal coming in on what we should actually do for the first release. We started this discussion in the previous meeting, and what we and we have to drive to a here's what we actually release, and it has to be something useful to people to start driving conformance from the DPU vendors and adoption. And for the DPU vendors, if there's a part of what's being proposed and pushed in the working groups, which we need to bring summaries here to review and agree to, but we have, you know, lifecycle and provisioning things that have already been agreed to. If a DPU vendor does not think that's a good thing or we should not support it, I need I need you guys to speak up, because otherwise there's no point in doing this, you know, doing OPI. The whole point is that we can have common set of services with API and common set of APIs and a common way of consuming the function of the DPU, which is not all possible components or software or use cases, but having things in common helps our consumers, our users, use multiple DPUs, pick the best DPU for the work they have to do, and then integrate it into their solutions. So we have to have we have to have participation and agreement from the DPU vendors, again, over and above committing resources. And again, as to bootstrap this thing, the agreement on what we're going to build and release should drive participation, because people say, that's something I can explain to my management on why we should participate and help drive this, because it's going to help us. That makes sense to everyone? Anybody want to amplify that or explain it a different way? Because, sometimes hearing explanations from kind of multiple views helps. Multiple ways of explaining helps. Does anyone disagree with that's the next thing we have to close on, is what do we actually release? So again, we have some life cycle and provisioning things we voted in. Are all the DPU vendors going to support those? And if you're not going to support it, you don't have to speak up here necessarily, but we have to have that conversation about why and what could we do different to get support. And I like the direction the Kubernetes, CNI, CSI discussions in the working groups. I like the direction that's going. I like the kind of the overall networking proposal discussion. The other parts of the Kubernetes support are good. So I think the right discussions are being had in the working groups, and we'll need to bring kind of, here's what we want to build into this group. And then I have one more separate topic, but I want to see if there's any discussion on that topic. Or does anybody disagree? Like, oh man, Joe, we're going to fail if we try to force conclusion. I think we'll fail if we don't. But. Okay. I don't hear. Okay, and then so we got to do that. All right. Last topic for. I think we need there are a couple of specifications around DPU hosting that we ought to consider. And we'll bring in a proposal. I think we'll bring in a proposal for one, I hope next week, but at worst case, the week after. And then Verizon has agreed the first meeting in March, tentatively, to come in with their with a reformulation or an enhancement of their kind of requirements as an end user who are looking to start deploying DPUs to optimize their problems. Optimize solutions to their problems. So Gene has agreed for the first meeting in March to come back and present here a revision of what they previously presented in the working groups, but an update. All right. So again, if you don't want to speak up here, let's have a private discussion. But anyway, I said enough. So again, speak up here, have a private discussion. Otherwise, I'm out of agenda topics unless somebody has something else to contribute. Boris, please.
Yeah, taking it a little bit to more technical field. Last week, we had a really good discussion on where OPI should focus in. And I'm really looking forward to continue the discussion on the TSC calls and not in the work groups. Are we doing the right thing? Are we defining the right set of APIs? I don't feel that we're getting enough direction from the TSC, which is supposed to be the technical steering committee, to what should we be focusing on in the working groups. We're defining more repositories, we're writing a lot of code, and we're still not aligned with TSC what we should do. So was a great comments from Tim last week, and Gene from Verizon, and you, Joe. But I feel that we need to continue the discussion. It didn't end, and we're not having the right conversation here. Lab and all is good. Defining the release, nobody speak up, so I'm not sure where this is going. But I feel we're not making any progress. We should get a very real technical guidance from you guys. Otherwise, I'm just running loose, right? Everybody is doing what they want. So please help us define what we are working on.
Yeah, and part of that has to flow from the use case group. The real point of the use case group is to say, here's 1 to n, where n is a small number.
I disagree. I think that use case group is an input to the technical steering committee, and technical steering committee should decide whether this input is valid or not valid.
Well, and the only input we have so far is firewall, which I don't think is right. Now, other things are coming into the use case group. The discussion we had last week in the use case group was starting to focus it more. But okay, there's a very large number of problems we could solve. And again, TSC members can bring proposals forward for what that should be. Tim?
Yeah, to Boris's point, I think Boris F5 is going to propose an actual application as a lead use case today. And I think if we go forward with that and attempt to actually create that application and use case, we're going to find all the gaps. We're going to find a lot of gaps. And a lot of those gaps are going to have to come back to the TSC to say, hey, you know, there's a lot of ways to solve this. Is this in our scope, and should we solve it, and how does it get solved? Because if we don't fill those gaps, we don't have a complete solution for any use case. So we hope that this first one is representative of many of the use cases, and it will help focus a lot of the work in the subgroups. And the outcome will be what Jill wants, which is something that's actually useful and is complete, and we can demonstrate to the world the value of the OPI's work.
All right, so we'll look forward to that that proposal, Tim. KYS.
Yeah, maybe I'm missing something here, but I just wanted to clarify, given that we have already more or less finalized the way we are going to rack up the servers and DPUs and the way we're going to connect them, does that not in some way also kind of you know, finalize the way the end users are supposed to be deploying DPUs?
No, so pretty much every DPU deployment has a rack of servers, and you know, with one DPU each, sometimes two, but typically one DPU each, with the network ports of the DPU hooked to a switch. That physical topology and arrangement not the thing, right?
So I was referring to the way DPU would interface with the server. Is it a PCI card? Is it, you know,
it's all PCI card.
The switch? Huh? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so okay, other than predominantly PCI cards. So we know that at least one vendor has proposed a switch resident DPU, and we know that Dash thinks that would be a good deployment for a cloud gateway use case, but I can model that with a host resident DPU just as well, right? Because I hook network ports of the DPU to the switch, and the packets go to the DPU and back out like a one-armed router, which is the exact same as the DPU sitting on the switch, and packets go in and out like a one-armed router.
And then if we want to have a situation where we have multiple accelerators that need to be connected to the server, that architecture is also, you know, there could be variations in terms of how we implement that. Meaning, you know, each of these accelerators could connect to the server through a PCI, you know, bus, or it could be that, you know, there's a peer-to-peer between these DPUs, and then we'll have one connection going to the I mean, there are certainly a number of different ways we can attach these DPUs to the server, depending upon the use case. And then, of course, you know, we want to understand exactly where we're going to run the management of all this DPU, that code, right? The administrative code we talked about in the last meeting. If it runs on one of these DPUs, do I need to replicate the same thing in every DPU, or do I have some kind of a topology where we run the management stack in one DPU and just leverage the APIs, OPI APIs in other DPUs to kind of configure them and provision them? Certainly, we need to do everything all at once at the start, but I just wanted to know.
So far what we've been defining is services that would run on the DPU, mostly lifecycle and provisioning. Secure ZTP is a good example. Plus, we've been defining APIs into the server, bridges to vendor code, and then APIs to control a relatively small subset of the possible DPU functions. We haven't been trying to define a global, here's how you run a cluster of DPUs. That's been out of scope so far, although again, we've discussed it abstractly.
All right, thank you.
And And again, alternate topologies for how you connect DPUs. The only one that's really meaningful would be connecting DPUs to each other, as opposed to connecting DPUs to a switch. And again, if I was going to build a model for a switch resident DPU, I would model it first by having an external DPU.
Yeah.
Because and then, you know, put a communication channel in for my control plane for setting up that DPU from the switch. You know, use just a socket to a piece of software on the DPU. So I could model that physical instantiation with a different one and have basically perfect fidelity, other than the hardware parts of it, like, you know, how do you cool it and where the buses actually physically run. But otherwise, it would behave exactly the same. So the only one we don't cover explicitly is DPU to DPU. But of course, with the setup we have, we could, if that use case emerges, we can connect the DPUs directly to each other. So I'm not worried about that aspect of it, KYS. If you have some, you know, diagram that you want to discuss, bring it in.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so thank you, everyone. I'll close the call now and keep working.